On the other hand, the West Bank itself, which they won, let's say by accident in a way, out of self-defense,
when their neighbors were about to attack them. Yeah.
Let's not beat around the bush. Mm-hmm. But to then have a long-term policy of repopulating that entire territory required through that war with the most nutcase, extremist, fanatical Jews, and to basically plan so that eventually they will outnumber Arabs in the West Bank and become... Now that, to me, if that process is still going on, and I'm a Palestinian, I see no reason to have a good faith negotiation with the Israelis, because they are, as we negotiate, changing the facts on the ground and have been changing the facts on the ground now with impunity for 30 years.
But the
Clinton
plan...
I know what the Clinton plan did, but they've been building settlements up the kazoo since the Clinton plan.
There's 2008 when Ehud Olmert, made a similar offer. And you're right, Netanyahu has not gone as far as Olmert or, for that matter, Ehud Barak, but...
The government is run by the settlers, essentially.
Listen, we're in a moment right now.
That makes it an expansionist state.
The current government is, at least the war is run by a unity war cabinet, but the head of the national police, we should say, is Smotrich, who is a lunatic. And I have no problem saying that I think that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are Judeo-fascists. The fact that Ben-Gvir, right until he joined the government, had a photo of the awful Baruch Goldstein in his office, who was a Jewish terrorist, of course, who went into a mosque. I mean, that to me is no different than Hamas or Iran putting up, murals praising suicide bombers and various terrorists. And that is in some ways troubling. Yossi Klein Halevi has talked about kind of how Jews need to have two conversations. There's a conversation to the rest of the world, like, hey, this is an existential war, and this is, and then there's a conversation among ourselves, which is, we cannot allow this, to continue. And I would just sort of contrast it with Menachem Begin, who would leave the Knesset whenever Meir Kahane, who was the first generation of Judeo-fascist in Israeli politics, whatever he would speak, because he had nothing to do with him. And of course, Menachem Begin is the, sort of the first non-labor center-right candidate through the founder of the Likud coalition.
But that surely shows how far the center in Israel has moved towards
it has, but what was the government right before this current one? It was the first government with the head of an Arab party in the ruling coalition in charge of an actual ministry. So there is a potential for flux, and my hope is, even though sometimes I think some of the criticism of Netanyahu is a bit too extreme for my taste, but I think he should lose. He deserves to lose. He was the only member of the leadership who didn't promise to resign.
Is there any future government of Israel that will not continue the policy of settlements?
I do think that it depends on what you mean by continue the policy of settlements.
Continue expanding those, often in the nethermost regions that are obviously...
Well, sometimes when they talk about expanding settlements, it's building within the...
I know.
Right.
But look, Eli, from a distance, you see this country having occupied a group of people, occupied a piece of land. Now, it may be into self-defense, but nonetheless, it's occupied. And then they're repopulating it with their own kind in order to outnumber the... This is not kosher. This is horrible. This is...
I think that if there was... listen, we saw...
There's not going to be a two-state solution
We saw in 2005, Ariel Sharon, who was at times the most right-wing figure in Israeli politics, endorsed a plan where he almost tore the country apart, all of the settlers and all of the military out of Gaza and 5 other settlements on the West Bank. Will it be difficult? Yes. Do the politics look really difficult right now? Absolutely, especially after October 7th. However, I do think that there are plenty of Israelis who would say, if we feel like there's somebody who can ready to make peace on the Palestinian side, we would be willing to give up most of this territory. I do think
I just don't buy that, I'm afraid, anymore. I just don't.
Well, I do think it's very much dependent on whether you're going to actually get peace, because the experience after withdrawing from Gaza was what we have now.
Right.
And so the argument
you can disband settlements without handing the whole place over. I mean, there's a middle way here. You don't. But my point is that you can hold these places, and be ultimately responsible for their security, as you kind of are, without resettling them with your own people, to keep open the possibility of a deal, which is the only deal that could conceivably lead to long-term security for Israel. And that was the feeling of the
But
Obama,
I don't know. Hold on. Is it long-term security for Israel? Because the question is, we are assuming that the Palestinians would accept far less than what they claim is they want all of it.